Hi, this is Doug Robinson with DefEdit Software LLC, and in this video we're going to be working with PowerShell. And specifically we're going to be showing you how easy it is to integrate a PowerShell script into a one-step in Cherwell. Now the reason you might want to do this is because there are many instances where you can extend the functionality of Cherwell using PowerShell. Essentially you can execute custom scripts using PowerShell. You can also execute external classes and assemblies that have been written in .NET on the .NET framework and stored in DLL files. Since PowerShell runs on the .NET framework, there's a lot of possibilities within PowerShell, and it also executes very efficiently, so you can get a lot of work done through PowerShell. And that's good, and in this video we're going to show you exactly how that's done. So my example in this video is going to be actually one of our maps. So we have a map out on the Exchange. I believe it's labeled Windows File Dialogues or something like that, where we have 3 one-steps that we added into this map. One of them's labeled Open File Dialog, one of them's labeled Open Folder Dialog, and one of them's labeled Save File Dialog. And what these do is they use PowerShell to display a series of Windows-based prompts. And this is significant because if you're working with Cherwell and you need to prompt someone either for a directory to save a file in or to pick a specific file, there's not a very elegant solution currently within Cherwell for asking someone to pick a file. But we can, ideally you would want the ability to use one of these built-in Windows-based prompts. So for example, this is the Windows Save As dialog. And if you're working in an external tool, for instance, if you're designing an app in Visual Studio, you can use a Save As file picker. I think there's a more elegant term for the control, but there's a file open dialog, there's a file browser dialog. You know, there's controls that give you these prompts within the .NET framework. And the handy fact about PowerShell running on the .NET framework is we can access these forms or these Windows Forms controls, and we can open them up through PowerShell. So what we're doing in this one step is we're writing out a PowerShell script that calls those Windows-based dialogues. And what we're doing is we're saving the result of them into a text file, and then we're storing it into a stored value. And the reason for this is you can execute this script. It'll prompt the user for the file that they're going to select, and then it stores the result into a stored value so that whatever your one step is that's calling it can access the result. So you don't have to re-implement this on every one step that uses it. You just need to run a one-step or run a one-step action to execute this script and then retrieve the result once it's done. Now the way that this is built is actually fairly simple, and if you were going to integrate a PowerShell script into a workflow of your own, here's how you would do so. You create a new write to a file action. Very first thing you should do is set format to plain text instead of rich text, and set make sure file is written to before next substep. These are the 2 easiest ways to screw up this action when you're trying to write a PowerShell script to the local disk, because it might not get written on time and it might be written in RTF format, which means your PowerShell exe is not going to be able to read the script that you write. And of course, if it already exists, you want to overwrite it. Now for the file name area, instead of directing a specific file path, what I always do to be very convenient for myself is I create a new file name token, and that's what this is here. So this is a file name token is what I'm going to call it. And what this does is it reserves a temp file in your local temp directory, and it manages it. So it includes a path to the temp directory. It deletes the file after the one step's done. You can assign a custom extension to it if you need to. And this automates the creation and the removal of this temp file if you need it to. It is actually one of my favorite parts of Cherwell, is that it makes handling these temp files so ridiculously easy, because you can reuse this multiple times in many different areas and it'll always create a new file, and generally you don't have a lot of problems with it. So this right here is one of the first convenient aspects of integrating with PowerShell, is you can integrate with that external tool without having to worry about managing a bunch of different local files. Next, you copy in your PowerShell script into the contents area of this write to a file action, and you'll notice I've got a file output token here for where my PowerShell script is going to export its results. This is another file name, so it's just another temp file. And if you haven't noticed, really all the file name does is manage getting a path for a file and then removing the file once it's done. It's great. We still have to populate the file, so this one right here is getting populated with this data in this write to file action. This file name for our file output is getting populated by the PowerShell script itself. Now that this is all done, we go to our run a program action. So you would drag and drop a run a program action into your one step. And this one's fairly simple. You run PowerShell.exe and you append the command line arguments file and then in quotes your file name token for the file path for your PowerShell script. I always include execution policy bypass. Now what this does, if you're not familiar with PowerShell, is it makes sure that the PowerShell script runs even if the machine does not allow PowerShell scripts to run. This is important because by default your machine does not allow PowerShell scripts to run. So if you run this on someone's machine who doesn't have PowerShell scripts enabled, it fails. You can easily bypass this by setting the execution policy flag to bypass. So I include this on any PowerShell script I execute, whether I think I'll need it or not, because you don't want to end up having to troubleshoot why your PowerShell script one step is running on one user's machine and not another's. This is just including it by default is an easy way to ensure that your PowerShell script works. The next important thing is to wait for the program to end before you continue. If your PowerShell has any kind of output that you need to monitor with your one step, you need to make sure that your one step doesn't go to the next action until the PowerShell script is finished executing. There's options to time this out after a certain number of seconds, and there's also an important option to store the exit code into a variable. This is important because your exit code can be 0 if the PowerShell script was successful, or I think 1 if there was an error, or I might have that backwards. I don't honestly remember because I don't use this option that frequently. And then additionally there's the option to run minimized or with a window open or maximized. I usually set this to minimized. I don't get a lot of I don't run into a lot of issues with this one because usually I run PowerShell scripts from the server, although this is a great example of one that runs on the user's machine. So they may see the window open and then quickly close, and then they'll see their prompt show up for their save as dialog. Finally, I'm saving the output of my PowerShell script, and you'll notice here I've got a read file token that takes the file output contents from our write to file output. So in our PowerShell script there was a section where it said, output the results to this file name, file output. This command right here has a selected file token that reads in contents from the file at this path of our file output file name. I know that's a lot of confusing uses of the word file, but that's essentially just grabbing the output or the results of our PowerShell script. And what this does is it stores it into a stored value, and then whatever one step is calling this action can get the results out of that stored value. And that's what we're doing. So that's actually the end of our video, and this is as simple as it is. In order to integrate Cherwell with PowerShell, all you have to do is write out your script to a file, execute it, and then optionally read in the results of your PowerShell script if there was an output from it. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find our website at defeditsoftware.com. Thanks.